Hey y'all, it's Sarah. You can see I got a bunch of goodies sitting in front of me. I am about to start a fun little patriotic weekend craft. I want to hurry up and get this knocked out so that I can get it out. This is very similar to one that some of you guys may recognize from last year, but I'm going a little more, um, a, I'm going back a few years in the style of flag that I'm going to be doing. I want this to be a much older style flag, much more rustic and rural. This one was actually inspired by one that I snapped a photo of at a local cotton patch restaurant. So I want to try to make my own version, albeit slightly smaller, but I thought I'd see if you guys wanted to try it along with me. You can see I've got a bunch of cut pieces here and a bunch of little goodies in front of me. As always, most of my crafts start off, if you're wondering what this stuff is laying out in front of me, it all starts off with some Readi-board foam board. This is something you find in your office supply and school supply section. It comes in a 20 by 30 sheet. It's very much like poster board, but you can see it's a little bit thicker. It's got this foam inner core. This particular style has you can hear it, it has the papery surface and not the more laminated surface. That's what I'm going to be using, or that's what I've used to get my various color pieces. I'm going to be using a full sheet of black also as my backer. The reason I go with black is it's a lot less effort to have a clean finished look at the end. The back side looks really nice. Your edges are a whole lot easier to just hit this very edge than trying to make sure that the edge and that inner ledge of the edge is covered. It all just works out for me in the end. Overall, this project is going to take about 3 sheets. If you want to go with the black like I have, it'll take 1 full sheet of black, and I'm also using 2 1-inch by 30-inch strips of black. You could do this with white. I'm using it for black out of convenience. It just, as a background, it just blends in a lot better. For the color pieces and framing, you're going to need about 1 other full sheet of white cut down into your 3-inch strips. Then you're going to want to cut your framing strips, and I'll go through really quick and tell you what my sizes are at. So I currently have 1 full 3-inch by 30-inch of my red. You could do plain white if you wanted to on this. I felt it was a little stark. This tutorial is not included with the paint tutorials for the red and blue, but there is a paint tutorial specifically for the reds and blues. I got that put up, I think, a couple weeks ago. So that's what you want to refer to kind of get these rustic looking reds and blues. This color has been up for a while. It's one of the lighter, more natural colors. I wanted something fairly light and white, but I didn't like the stark white personally. I'll be sure to try to link this color below also. The wood is entirely just the plain wood. There's several videos for different wood tones in this regard. I typically go with kind of the barnwood look, whether in a lighter scale or a darker scale. These, I've got 4 strips of 1.5 inch by 30. I always go with a 30-inch cut because this stuff is manufactured in that direction. And by that, I mean the foam inside kind of, for lack of a better word, it kind of warbles in that direction when it's manufactured. And when you cut against that, you have less clean cuts. And then when you go to do your faux paint technique, you can actually see those ripples across your paint technique. So I typically always go at the 30-inch length when I do my cuts. So aside from these full-size pieces, I've got my 3 by 30-inch here. These pieces are 3 by 16. So I have 2 of the red and 1 of the lighter, whiter color. I've got 3 of the blue, and they're in 3-inch by 14-inch. And that's pretty much all the components. I've got a few extras. You guys saw that I set my little goodies aside. I'm going with, you could go with any kind of star, and you could actually make your own star or stars. You could use stickers, things like that. Any way you want to do your star field. I really like the idea of this rustic galvanized metal look with this rustic feel. It's very close to the example that I snapped a photo of at Cotton Patch. So this is the largest one that Dollar Tree carries, and it's about 7¼ to 7½ inches wide. So it's a really good scale for what I'm working at. But you could also go with this one they have at Dollar Tree. It's more dimensional. I think that's fine. It's a slightly smaller scale, but honestly, really not by much. They have these much smaller stars in a 3-pack if you wanted to put more in your field, or maybe do them in a circle, something like that. I'm using the smaller Dollar Tree Party Favor size yo-yos. You could use the full size ones if you guys haven't seen me do some of the barn door looking videos. You can see by having these kind of two supplies here that this one will be kind of a barn door style setup. So I'm going to be throwing in a few other goodies as I go, depending on what my imagination takes me. And I'll share those and a few other ideas with you just for small details like the hardware for this. So I'm ready to dive in and start constructing this. It's pretty simple and very straightforward once you have your cuts done. So I'm going to start laying it out. Remember I said that this flag is more of a rustic style, maybe an older version kind of idea of the flag. I've already done a couple of flags last year with the faux wood look. I'm kind of at a point where I like the idea that I've got a nice little collection going of these different style rustic flags. If you want a more accurate version, you're going to use different dimensions. Mine's only going to have 6 stripes, a field of blue, and 1 large star. But you could certainly cut these down to get the more accurate representation of a modern day flag if you really wanted to. Or do this one and do a modern day one. I'm actually planning on doing another video after this for kind of just for my fellow Texans mostly. I plan on doing a matching Texas flag to go along. I don't know. It's a thing in Texas. They decorate with the flag everywhere in the Texas star. So when in Rome, that's what I'm going to do. All right. So the construction of this, like I said, very straightforward. I am going to start at the bottom because I feel like that's going to make it easiest. Like I said, this right here very well could be in white if you happen to have more white sheets there. But I'm using black because it saves me on my final details. So really quickly, this 1-inch strip is going to go across the bottom. This is intended to bulk up our frame area. So I'm using regular Dollar Tree hot glue. I've got it all the way down my strip. Using my fingers, I want to get this thing really nicely aligned. The better you sandwich those together, the cleaner edge that you can get overall when you go to finish off this piece and kind of give it the rest of its realism. So from here up, I'm going to go ahead and get my my pieces laid out. You can see these aren't even spectacular. I've got some paint transfer on this one that I'm not even going to pay any, never mind to. I'm still going to go ahead and use this. I think it adds to the more rustic idea of this. Guys, don't get stuck on, try not to get stuck on having every single faux wood looking piece to perfection. Because here's why. Once you add some of those less than perfect pieces in with your more successful pieces, then you really start getting even more realism because nature doesn't give us perfection typically when it comes to wood boards, wood pieces. So you can see where I have bumped this up. I'm going to go ahead and figure out where my striping is going to be. And you can kind of see where this goes. So I'm going to go ahead and start gluing these bottom 3 strips in place. I feel like that's going to make it the easiest for me to get everything from here up completed. And then I'm going to go ahead and as you can see here, I have gotten my bottom 3 stripes in their place along with my little filler piece. One tip that I want to give you, when you go to place these particular pieces, keep in mind if you have an edge that has the perforation, and you can see that's where the sheets are cut. Usually all the edges have kind of this perforated edge. Try to flip those to your outer area for this particular section, and here's why. This cleaner, smoother cut is going to bump up to this other one a little better, and this edge is going to be covered with a frame, so you're not going to see that quite as easily along this area as you would right here down the center portion. I'm going to consider the same thing with my blue field. And we are going to try to bump these together. Now I want you to see where this cut edge is. And I'm going to show you a really quick way to kind of make that look a little more natural. So what I have right here is a little bit of Waverly wax and antique and a little Waverly chalk paint and ink, and I keep those mixed together, and it is mostly the Waverly wax, the antique color, with maybe just a little blob. I just usually take a little popsicle stick and will blob a little bit of black in there, and it tones down and darkens that shade just a hair. And it kind of tones down a little bit of the kind of honey red tones that antique color comes in. I prefer this to do my edges and things like that, with it being that slightly shade darker. That's kind of my go-to solution, and I always keep a little batch mixed. I'm taking just a cut off half of one of the Dollar Tree kitchen sponges. I'm not loading this thing very much. Typically, it's usually already saturated for me. And I'm going to go ahead and do these edges like you would. I'm going to kind of flick across there and shade that down a little bit to give it a little shadowing and a little dimension there. Not much. Not going super heavy there. And I'm going to do the same thing with these pieces. The lighter color, that white, that creamy kind of white, I'm not going to do the shadows on it quite the same way. It is such a light color, I don't think it's necessary. So I am just going to go ahead and flick that just a hair. And this is just going to help those cut raw edges meet up a little nicer right there at your star field. So I want to make sure all of those are done. And you can see now that blend for them is going to be so much better in appearance. And you know what? I didn't shade my little knot hole on this one in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to darken that thing just a little. If I'm going to have it there, it might as well have a little character to it. So I've just kind of shaded that in a little bit, gave it a little more dimension. And there we go. You can see where these are going to be attached down. Now, typically with the blue field to the stripes, as far as dimensions go, it's usually about 1/3 to 2/3 span. I went a little further than that because that's why I went at the 14 inches, because I knew the framework was going to kind of cover some of this, and I wanted a big enough field for the stars. You could always go a little smaller with this, but for me, I wanted to go that route, so it's not in the 1/3, 2/3 kind of ratio on mine, but keep that in mind for yours if you do want a little closer to accuracy. So next thing is I'm going to go ahead and get my red and white stripes down, and then I can get my blue field down. And you can see that when I lay mine, I always try to, I try to get it aligned on this edge really well with my fingers. I want to make sure that those edges where you glue to the edges, that's where you want things the most secure, because as you move this around, if you're going to hang it and things like that, the more you move that and pop those loose, the more likely you are to make this stuff peel up on you. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to adhere down these two sections, my star field and my stripes, and then we're going to go ahead and finish out the framing and add some of our fun details. Now I have all of these pieces adhered down. You can kind of see that in the kind of spirit of not striving for perfection, I've left a few little gaps kind of there. That's part of the reason why I wanted a black background, because I'm not going to see any white shining through. I just see dark shadow, which really gives this kind of not having them bumped together super perfectly really gives this even more dimension, because you can see there's depth down into it. So I went ahead and adhered my other little filler piece up here, the other little black filler piece. So now this surface is perfectly even with each other. You could absolutely do a mitered frame if you wanted to. I'm not. I'm going to make this just as simple as possible. So I have my strips painted on this side. I want to make sure that's the side that's going inward, because it's much harder to paint this white edge later. This side on the outer edge, when we go to paint all of those at one time, it's not a big deal to hit that one too. So same thing here. I'm going to just go ahead and start at the bottom because it's closest to me at the moment. And I'm going to try to get this adhered down. And I'm going to keep with the framework that this is a very simple frame job. That way I can add a few more details to it with maybe some hardware type accessories if I want to. And I'm just aligning this frame right against that edge. I'm going to spin this around, and I want to do the opposite sides on this at this point. When going with a frame like this, you could very easily come in and go ahead and chop them down if you wanted to. Figure out your measurement in between, either which way. I typically always go this route and then just measure what that space is in between. But whatever is easier for you, do it that way. And you can see that mine will just bump up against one another, just like this. So this is what I mean about bumping it into place. I just flipped my little piece over so I could see my marks a little better. And I marked right where it's gonna go. That way I could cut it to fit, just in case there was any kind of measurement off. I find it easier that way. I think sometimes I have a little room for error on my cutting, and I usually try to find ways to protect it. And you see, by doing that, you can hear that literally pop into place, and it is such a snug fit. So all I have to do is pop a little glue on here. I am also going to, I'm taking my little sponge, and this white raw edge to where it bumps to there, I'm just going to make sure that that edge has a little paint on it. And this other edge is already done. And I've got such a nice snug fit now, and when they fit that nice and tight between each other, when they're sandwiched that well, you get less room for movement. So that's where I'm at this point. You could really stop here and not do the extra that I'm going to do. You could leave it just as your flag. I'm bringing in my star. It's going to have its attachment point right there. There is some other ideas. Dollar Tree has the galvanized metal letters and numbers now. I had considered doing the smaller star like this and using their numbers to do something like 1776 on there, which I thought would be really cute. Also, for the more vintage age style flag, However, given what my next matching flag is going to look like to this for myself, I decided this was the route I wanted to go because my Texas flag is going to be very, very similar. So I wanted them to look like some pretty coordinated pieces. I'm not going to attach that just yet because I don't want to risk knocking it off. But I want to show you some of the fun details now. This is the part that I like. This is the part that I really get into. So right now at this stage of planning is, if you're going to continue further with the details like I'm going to, this is a really good point to go ahead and come in and do these white edges and get your paint applied to those, because once we attach our hardware up here, it's a little harder to go across there. I'm not going to do that right now for the sake of time, and I don't want to get paint all over my other supplies. But for those of you that are not doing it for in video time, go ahead and do it now and just save yourself the headache of trying to work around the hardware that we add. I did want to show you what I was talking about. You can see I did one of these, I kind of aged a little bit. But they have these really cool galvanized numbers. You could always add those up here. Go with the smaller stars. You can get creative and kind of customize your look a little bit. I want to bring in a few goodies that I've got sitting right here. Little things that I kind of threw on here to play with and show you where I'm going with this idea. So I took my yo-yos apart. They're not very difficult to take apart. Literally, you just pull them apart. And they come apart like this. There is one side, I think typically usually how that's described is there's like a male end and a female end that those connect with. We're going to use the I guess what you would consider the female side, and put that together. And I want to show you some ideas of what I did. So I've got what looks like actual real hardware, and that's what I've done. I dug around the junk drawer and pulled out some real hardware, but I want to show you that you can do a lot of this with, guys, this is how I store all of my bling. Just a little piece of cardboard, and I've got them tagged in each color or whatever. But I've got, this is some of the Dollar Tree bling. A lot of this is Dollar Tree bling. So take some of those, use that as your screws. I've already painted out some popsicle sticks. You can do all kinds of things with those. You know, you can add hardware down through here. We're going to add some hardware up there. I wanted the look of real metal pieces, and I wanted to show you some ideas. So I actually put real legit washers on here. I have no shortage of screws and tools and things like that. I'm married to a mechanic. So these are like 97 cents at Walmart for this package of them. We needed them for something else. We only needed a couple, and we couldn't find any of the right size. So now I hijacked these for my craft room so that I'd have real ones. But I want to show you could absolutely do some artificial ones. Dollar Tree has their little chessboard game set thing. Let me grab that. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So they have this. I have this. You can use the wood inside of there for any kind of sign. I love these little pieces. I use them for some of my miniatures. But if you look, they come with like black and raw wood round pieces for the checkers part. And they're not super big. They're about the size of a dime. So those would totally work. Also, if you want to glue those down to here and give yourself kind of a washer. And you can see I kind of whipped one together. You could spray paint these silver. I spray painted all of my yo-yos black with black spray paint, just a plain flat cheap black spray paint. And then I went back in with my Waverly black ink chalk paint so that I could give it a little texture over that, because even with flat spray paint, because this is a plastic surface, it was still a little shiny. So I went in with chalk. You could go to this stage, paint it all out, and have you some pretty realistic looking hardware. There's other options. This little travel game, this 4 in a row game has also some little round plastic pieces. You could very well use those as washer type materials. This is the part I like, guys, throwing out these ideas, and you can run with them. So you can use your fake washers, and I used one of the little pearls. Obviously, you would paint this all out to whatever color that you wanted to use. You could use this as hardware here and here at these intersections of your framing. Let's see what else I want to show you. So scrapbookers, some of you, if you're hanging out with me, you may have some of these. These are scrapbook brads that the ends of them either look like flathead screws, or let me pull one of those out, Phillip heads. These are really cool. They pop straight through the foam core like butter. You can actually use the real deal. I hijacked, you can see, where we keep just little small screws and things. I kind of stole that out of one of the tool drawers. And you can see I took one of these short, stubby, real screws. Pop this little fella out of here. You could absolutely put a little hot glue there on the threads. You could pop that into there. I popped mine through a washer, and I filled this little hole right here. You can see it. I filled that little hole with some hot glue and dropped the tip straight into there, glued right in place. I ended up with this. I thought maybe I would paint over it, age it, distress it, or something, but honestly, I really like this contrast of real metal against what looks like black cast iron type material. Throwing all those details in there, let me take that a step further. Dollar Tree has these, it's called a chalk writer. It is not, in fact, chalk. It is actually a waxy material. I use gold on mine, and I know it's very, very hard to see that little bit of kind of gold edging blended into this. Maybe you can see there a little bit. I use gold to show you what I did. I want to go ahead and do it with the silver because I felt like you could see it a little better. So with this waxy pencil, and I'm using just one of the edges of my popsicle stick that I painted. Once you get that waxy part on there, take your finger and, well, that shows the strength of that popsicle stick, guys. That was a little unexpected. I'm going to grab another one. Maybe I won't break this one. So take that wax and run it across there. Rub that in some. And you can kind of see it almost, maybe you can see that. It gives it a little more detail. You can kind of brush it on there along all the edges of anything that you want to make look metal. I like it with the gold because using the gold one almost gives it that, what do they usually call that surface? Brush bronze, maybe. It kind of gives that idea of it. So that's what I did with my hardware pieces. Okay, so I'm going to run through really quick what I chose to do for my hardware. You can see I've got my half a yo-yo. I'm going to fill that little center cap there with my glue. I'm going to take my washer and my short little stubby screw here. Whoops. And that's going to go straight into the center. I have that popped in there. I'm going to show you, this is the gold Dollar Tree chalk writer. Maybe you guys can see that. It's really hard to show some of the kind of smaller visuals sometimes. So I'm just hitting all these edges, and then I'm just going to rub that on there. The more you blend that out, the more it starts going into kind of that brushed bronze type metal look. Do it on kind of the curvy parts. Just keep rubbing. The more you rub it, and the warmth and friction is going to melt that chalk down a little bit, or that chalk wax type material down a little bit. So I have my 2 hardware pieces. I'm going to use 4 popsicle sticks. I've already painted mine with just black chalk paint. I have cut them down to 4 inches. You could do this however wide you really want your little piece to show up. So all I did, cut them down to 4 inches. I want to show you guys this little tool, and I'll try to remember to link it. And you can do this with scissors, you really can, but I tend to end up, you saw what I did with the popsicle stick, I tend to break it with scissors. So this little tool right here is just like some tin snips. And I just snip that right on off, as pretty as you please. Little fine sandpaper, you don't want anything too rough, just because it does splinter. That wood is so thin, it does splinter. So for my little raw edge ends, I'm just taking this black Dollar Tree furniture marker. Make this real simple. I could have waited and painted afterwards, but typically, because I know I'm going to cut these round ends off, it makes it easier to hold on to these round ends to paint them instead of them sliding all over my surface. So that's why I do it this direction. And I'm just going to go in, hit all of those snipped edges so that I've got like this solid black looking iron kind of piece. If you got any splinters from cutting it, go ahead and kind of touch those up. Such a cheater way to do it. There we go. Now I'm going to do the same thing with these. Most likely, I'm not going to go super heavy, but I am going to take that gold and barely hit it and then really smooth it out. Now, I really hope some of that shows on how that ends up looking. But it's kind of a cool effect to really give that perception that it is that brushed iron kind of look. Just be careful when you're doing it on the wood pieces. You don't want splinters. And you don't even have to take it that far. You could go solid black and it not be a big deal. So, we're just going to attach these. And you can do it a couple different ways. I'm going to spin this puppy around because my arms just... their Go-Go Gadget feature is not currently working, so I'm going to make it a little closer to me. You can decide where you want this to line up, whether you want to come all the way down here and align your pieces at this portion. If you're going to go this portion, be sure that you account for that if you want to come down further. If you want to come up here more towards this area, you know, be sure to calculate that when you go to cut your popsicle sticks. I'm going at this level because I wanted to keep some pretty good simplicity in this. I am doubling up on this right here just because, I don't know, I wanted to do it. That's why I'm using the number of popsicle sticks that I am. I had considered putting it there on this go around, but I really like the idea of this metal hardware showing with my metal star. So I'm just kind of doubling up there. You could very easily come in and do this right here. So this is one of the Dollar Tree little cubes. I haven't painted mine yet because I wanted you to be able to tell what it is. They have the packages of these little wooden cubes. They also have their tumbling tower pieces. They will actually fit this direction in between these two. If you want that for more security, I'm actually going to be using this one. So, and what's fun is that it fits perfectly between the layers that we've used. So to make this a little easier, I am going to go ahead and adhere this little section together. And I think that I'm coming all the way to this edge. I feel like that's going to make it a little easier. It's going to make sure that my little popsicle sticks line up top and bottom the entire time. So I feel like that's my easiest route. I'm just here to throw the ideas at you, and you can go whichever way visually pleases you. But you can do the same thing with these pieces and use it as kind of your guide there. I'll slide this a little more even there for myself. And I'll be able to just kind of push this in place. And anywhere I want it now, those layer of popsicle sticks are going to match up. Same thing for this side. I'll put that one together. We're going to add our kind of barn door wheel. And you're pretty much good once you figure out what stars you want to use. And don't forget that there's always the wooden options. They sell these in multi-packs, or you could have used white star stickers. I realize that this one has the hole in it from where the string ran. That honestly doesn't bother me. If it does bother you, you can kind of fake that out by putting a little tiny piece of foil down under there so you don't notice it as much. So I'm going to go ahead and glue my little wheel. And get it glued pretty heavy. Now you can always add some other hardware, like with the fake screws out of the pearls and things like that. Which I'm probably going to do, but I'm going to tell you guys, I'm using carpet tacks. So these, it doesn't say how many is in here. It just says 2 ounces. There is a whole lot of these in here, and they look like old-fashioned hand-hammered nails. So that was the part of the reason why I decided that I was going to go with this really kind of blunt looking frame rather than going with the mitered frame, because I wanted to be able to do this. You can see how easy that was even for me with all the struggles that I have with everything these days. This is the perfect thickness to do this on. They're not poking through on the back side of it. You could do it on this end here. You can do it anywhere really that you want to add those little details. I went a little crooked with that one, and that's okay. You could try to do it through your popsicle sticks. I did find, for those of you that are scrapbookers and still have these around, you can punch through popsicle sticks very easily with the crocodile. That's what this thing is called. It punches through thin. It probably punched through this. It can punch through quite a few items very nice and cleanly, and it has 2 different options of holes. You can see how cool that ends up working out. I love this thing. I've used it for all kinds of things as my kids were growing and their belts needed to be adjusted. It worked fantastic for that. It's kind of been a household thing. My husband has used it for several things himself. So it has definitely gotten its money's worth. They do have a smaller version that's less big and bad than that guy. I do not have the smaller version. I've never really had a need for it. Everything I seem to want to play with, I wanted a better reach on it. So now I've got this one put together. We're almost put together, so I can pop it in its place. And when I go to do my edges, I can always come back in and do this little piece in black also. You see, it just kind of slides right on in there. Right now, I can sit here and play with it and decide where I want this thing to line up. I'm thinking I'm just going to come a few inches over. It still looks just as cute if you want to make it go down this panel. But I kind of wanted it to look like it was actually going to hold. The other fun thing that you can do with this, the other fun idea that I want to throw in there, the same way I use the carpet tacks, you guys can use thumbtacks, the flat thumbtacks, and paint those if you want. Pop them in a little piece of foam core and paint them out. Because all I ever find at Dollar Tree is the really shiny silver ones. But you can pop them in a little scrap piece of foam core and paint them out black if you'd like to. But this is the other fun thing that I wanted to show you. I am going to grab just a piece of black foam core, and I've actually painted the black over it some too, so you can see this is actually, the whole piece looks solid. That's the color it was. This is a 1-inch strip. So when I am done, I can come in and put this in there also. And this actually looks like a functional piece or a functional barnwood type door. You don't have to add this piece. I think it looks just as well with its little components here without any issue. I think these make fun decorative pieces right here to add to pretty much any of your foam core pieces. You can make this hardware look really real. So this ends up being approximately, we know it's going to be 30 inches wide with our hardware and stuff at the top. You are looking at the scale that mine's at, it's right about 23 inches. So that's a pretty good size piece. I think it's a fun size piece. This is not something small. This is going to be an attention getter. I know that with the way that I film at a distance, it does make everything look smaller in proportion until you make it. But it really is a good size little flag. I can't wait to get my matching ones done with it. And maybe figure out a few different details for those. For my Texas friends, if you hang out with me, be sure to check out the Texas flag version. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to leave any of the other states out. You guys are all just as important. However, I really don't need all the state flags. So, but it might still be a good one to give you an idea of maybe how you can recreate your state flag if you'd like. I don't know why it's such a thing for Texas. It is. And I just learned to kind of go with the flow when I moved here. So this is all I've got, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to finish out my details, get my edges done, and hopefully get this put up so I can show it off a little bit. And thanks for hanging out with me, y'all. Bye.